Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, we're getting closer. We're looking ahead to the first leg of the Triple Crown, which this year is the Belmont Stakes.
Yes, stay with us. Brian and I will take an early look at the possible field.
3.5 weeks away, and it looks like we could have a lot of big names. Stay tuned. Watch it all right now on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the super pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I am really good, Brian. Hey, we're heading to June, so it's time to start talking about the Triple Crown.
Matt, we only have 3.5 weeks, and I think I live here in Kentucky, not far from Louisville, but you live out in New Jersey, not all that far from beautiful Belmont Park, and as we know, the Belmont is always the first leg of the Triple Crown.
Yeah, like I said before, only 3 weeks till the Triple Crown, except it's not the end, it's the beginning this year.
Belmont Stakes, folks, I'm sure by now you've heard the news, and if you haven't, the Belmont has been moved to June 20, which will put it well ahead of this year's strange Triple Crown schedule with the Kentucky Derby in September, the Preakness in October. So it's the Belmont that will get the end of spring highlight here, the first leg of the Triple Crown, and I think that means something. The Kentucky Derby still has the name the Kentucky Derby, but the first leg of the Triple Crown is important in that it draws the biggest names that we've been watching so far this year. And Matt, it looks like this year's edition could draw the biggest names, maybe a better overall field than we're used to for the Belmont, which usually comes at 1.5 miles and at the end of the Triple Crown. Let's start with a horse we don't know for sure is going to go, but let's start with Maxfield, because we now have a very interesting decision coming on the Son of Street Sense, Matt, after he looked like a very good thing in returning in Saturday's Matt Win Stakes.
Yeah, that's for sure, Brian. Maxfield came up, questions were asked, and he had all of the answers in the race. I think he looked as good as he possibly could off of that long layoff against a pretty decent field. He did things he didn't do before. He got out of the gate really well. He was closer to the pace. He raced in tight quarters in a lot of traffic. And when the time came, he got clear and won the race convincingly.
Yeah, well, that pretty much sums it up, Matt. I was impressed with the way he was pinballed a little bit between horses going into the first turn. That tells you something about what this horse is made of mentally and physically. The physicality of this horse is a bit of a sight to behold. He's a young 3-year-old still, and he really looks like a big, strong, classic-looking horse, Matt. I remember a horse that I liked years ago named Risen Star, who proved it on the track in the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes, of course. And Maxfield reminds me a little bit. He's got that just big, dark physicality about him that looks so much like a classic horse. Of course, he was sired by a Breeders' Cup Juvenile and Kentucky Derby winner. Showed more speed, like you said, which is probably a good sign moving forward. It gives him a little bit of an ability not to be so dependent on the early pace, and really kicked it in late under what looked like maybe less than 100% effort. Went pretty wide on both turns, decent field, really big performance. Now you got to wonder though, because you got big names like Nadal and Tis the Law and Charlton. Is Maxfield going to be ready for those guys? Those guys after only one race, after a 7.5-month layoff, 3 races lifetime, which is not all that unusual if you're looking at the top contenders, but only one race in such a long time. Will he be ready to run in the Belmont? Are they going to run him in the Belmont?
That's a good question, and so many things you have to consider. He certainly looks like a horse that has more room to improve, because he was still a little bit green coming down the stretch, a little zigzagging going on there. But I don't know, Brian, don't you have to take a shot here? I know for Maxfield as his record is, it's a little bit short notice, 4 or 5 weeks between the Matt win and the Belmont Stakes, but it's a shot to win the Triple Crown. I don't care whether you want to put an asterisk on it or not.
Yeah, Matt, don't give me 4 weeks. 4 weeks for a racehorse. Come on, that's plenty of time. But the issue is Nadal and Tiz the Law and Charlatan have been racing this year, and Maxfield's only had the one race. Brendan Walsh, Godolphin. I think they both realize the first leg of the Triple Crown is a huge thing, so I could easily see them going to the Belmont. But on the other hand, he looks like a 10 furlong horse. He looks like a 12 furlong horse. So maybe they say the Kentucky Derby is the biggest thing, and with a horse with only one race under his belt, maybe the natural progression would be a race like the Bluegrass next, and to get him to the Kentucky Derby, not the Belmont, as best they possibly can. So it'll be a very interesting decision. But I'll tell you what, Maxfield joins several good-looking young big names on our 3-year-old list here, and a lot of them are pointing for the Belmont. So let's talk more about them. Co-favorites on my early morning line, Matt, we have here is Nadal and Tiz the Law. Let's talk Nadal first. I always thought he was a horse suited for a distance, even though he has quite a bit of early pace, the son of Blame. Now he drops back to one turn, but he really has done everything right so far in his short career.
Yeah, that's certainly true, Brian. And even though, like you said, he does look like a horse that can handle virtually any distance, and from the running style that he's shown thus far, it seems like the one turn, 1 1/8, which of course fans at Belmont Park, that's the configuration of the race. It looks like Nadal will handle that just fine.
Yeah, he should, and we saw a lot of speed when he broke his maiden, when he won the San Vicente, a grade 8 sprint stake out in California, and the Rebel, and then the Arkansas Derby. Matt, I think we saw something very important and something that's a good sign for Nadal if we're talking about a real future superstar, is that he was able to sit pretty comfortably off Wells Bayou early in the first part of that race, and then pretty easily go by him when they straightened out. So Nadal has done everything well. He's bred to go long. The Belmont this year, 9 furlongs. He doesn't need to go long next time, but certainly one of the ones to beat in the Belmont, as is Tiz the Law, Matt. And Tiz the Law, by the way, is the horse I have number 1 on my list. The Son of Constitution, the New York bred Son of Constitution, trained by Barclay Tagg, has been terrific this year in 2 starts down in Florida.
Yeah, and even though, Brian, you brought up those 2 very impressive wins down in Florida, of course, Tiz the Law gets a little bit of the home field advantage because aside from the winter, Belmont Park is the home of trainer Barclay Tagg, and Tiz the Law, of course, had that very, very impressive victory as a 2-year-old at Belmont Park in the Champaign, which was a one-turn race, one-turn mile, for Tiz the Law, but the extra distance will be no issue for the Son of Constitution.
Yeah, and as we're talking about the very best classic horses in this field right now, I said I like Tiz the Law best, but if you ask me who might like 10 furlongs or farther more, I might lean to Maxfield. I might even lean towards Nadal. I'm not sure yet. That hasn't been proven out. I need to see more from Tiz the Law. But I tell you what, 9 furlongs, and one turn, 9 furlongs. And the fact that it's at Belmont, like you so eloquently pointed out, I think these are all advantages for Tiz the Law. I think there will be speed ahead of them where he can sit off it a little bit. We know he likes Belmont. In fact, I think our producer, Brett Workman, is probably going to show that Champaign here as we're talking about it. But he ran a really good Champaign, second race of his life last year. He didn't break very well, and it was a big performance, and Barclay Tagg's home track. So Tiz the Law has that advantage, and I think the fact that this is 9 furlongs, I think Jack Knowlton, the managing partner there of Sakatoga Stable, probably had a pretty big grin on his face when they announced the date and the distance of this year's Belmont Stakes, excuse me. All right, Matt, so we talked about co-favorites. Nadal, Tiz the Law, 3-1. By the way, Maxfield is 5-1. If he runs, I think he's a really, really solid 4th choice. And then you got sitting there right behind the favorites is Charlatan, and Charlatan has gotten a whole bunch of talk in his short career. Impressive maiden win, impressive allowance win, easy as she goes win in the Arkansas Derby, Matt. Charlatan is certainly a lightning rod for discussion because of what he did on the racetrack. Now we know he's a little bit of a lightning rod for discussion from news that's been breaking in the last day or two.
Yeah, that's for sure. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more maybe on the next show, and folks can certainly read a lot more about that at Horse Racing Nation. But this Belmont Stakes with this field, the three that we've already talked about and others to come, will absolutely be the sternest test that Charlatan will ever have had to face. We know from the Arkansas Derby victory that in those split divisions that Charlatan got a much softer division in there and won easily in hand. But he's facing Grade 1 winners, quality horses, a lot of other speed signed on. It'll be a big test. I know we've had this conversation about Baffert horses in the past.
Yeah, interesting. And we certainly believe it to be the weaker division of the Arkansas Derby, although there are a couple of horses that ran behind him in that Arkansas Derby who are listed on our Belmont Stakes possibles here. By the way, folks, we have 13 listed right now as possibles. I expect another horse or two to join that fray, and we'll probably lose a few maybe on this list, but these are the 13 that we think are either probable or possible as we know it 3.5 weeks out. Charlatan, yeah, that Arkansas Derby was so easy, but you're right. This is a much tougher test than he's ever faced before. I do want to talk a little bit about what we do know so far in that two horses from the Bob Baffert barn had positive tests come back for banned substances. It's been reported that Charlatan, of course, was one of the two, the winner of one division of the Arkansas Derby. It looks like the banned substance was lidocaine, which is a numbing agent and can be used to help horses feel a little bit better where they might be hurting a little bit. We're waiting for the split sample, which means we're waiting for another sample to come back either positive or negative to see where they go before. But this raises some serious questions. Of course, it comes not far after the whole Navarro and service scandal. It also comes not too far removed from Justify, and remember, Justify was a horse who was allowed to run in the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness and the Belmont, which he won them all and then never raced again. But he won them all after a positive test out in Santa Anita. And I don't think the Arkansas, the president of Oaklawn, Sella, wants to let something like that happen again. So if this indeed comes back as a second positive, pretty much proving that Charlatan had lidocaine in his system for the Arkansas Derby, I think there's a chance that we see Charlatan not only taken down from the Arkansas Derby, but maybe not allowed to race in the Belmont.
Yeah, well, I don't know in the timeline of around 3 weeks left if there will be enough definitive information and if the legal process will have had time to work itself out that Charlatan's racing in the Belmont Stakes will be in danger. We got to wait for the test to come back, and apparently it took an awful long time for the results of the first test to come through, and then of course Baffert is entitled to all due process under the legal system, appeals and such. It would seem dubious that Charlatan's appearance in the Belmont Stakes would be a danger. But for me, this is not the first time that Baffert has been at the center of discussions about positives coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, very interesting. And Baffert certainly has been involved in things like this before, and I talked about it. You agreed with me how much Charlton's career to this point has mirrored that of Justify, and now sadly, it furthers that in the positive test. In case you don't remember, folks, Justify had a positive test after the Santa Anita Derby, which was, for lack of a better word, which was swept under the rug for a long time before it was made public or leaked to the public. So this time, I think it's going to be a little bit different, but we are looking at that story as it unfolds down there in Arkansas for sure. 4 big names. If you get all 4 very interesting Belmont Stakes: Nadal, Tis the Law, Charlton, and Maxfield. Good stuff. There's one long shot that I know I like right now a little bit as a horse who could upset the apple cart or at least get into a prominent role at the finish, and that's Sol Volante. I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this one, Matt, but I think One Turn for the Son of Carrick-and-Ty, Breeders' Cup Mile winner, might be a good thing. And this is a horse who has a real good turn of foot. It looks like there could be some solid speed in this Belmont. I like how all that's setting up for Sol Volante. He's pretty fresh, having not run since second in the Tampa Bay Derby, where he came from last to rally up for second in a big field through some traffic. Turn of foot, 9 furlongs with some speed. I think Sol Volante is an interesting long shot.
Yes, an interesting long shot with a good resume. When you consider that he's going to come after that big 4 horses that we just talked about, that's going to be mean a good price. His big victories both came at Tampa Bay, with his win in the Sam Davis, and then his second place performance in the Tampa Bay Derby. And I agree. He's going to get the kind of setup that he wants in terms of pace, but facing a significant step up in quality of field.
Yeah, depending which of the 4 are in here, he'll likely be a double digits long shot, unless maybe we only end up with 2 of those top 4, or 3 of the top 4, even 3 of the top 4. I think you're talking double digits on Sol Volante, and I think to me right now he's the most interesting long shot. I think a lot of people will look to modernists, though. Bill Mott, one of the great horsemen we have in this country, has the son of Uncle Mo progressing. He did pretty well down in Louisiana. Mott, modernist, I could see him getting some talk before the Belmont. Looks like he's headed there.
Sure. The son of Uncle Mo, trained by Bill Mott. So, and of course, Bill Mott stabled at Belmont Park for most of the year. Modernist in his races thus far, his win in the Risen Star and his third place finish in the Louisiana Derby. I guess I would kind of describe his running style as a slow and steady pace presser in there. And I don't know, you got an awful lot of quality in terms of early pace and the ability to stay from the top 4 or 5 horses that we've talked about. I just see him as a notch below the others.
I agree with you. If we're talking about Sol Volante and modernist as maybe the 5th and 6th choices in here, I do like Sol Volante because of that turn of foot, as opposed to modernist, who maybe a grinder, tiny bit of tactical speed, but not a whole lot of speed. On the good note, it looks like he's getting better as he's developing, and Bill Mott is known for that. And you can't certainly discount his win in the Risen Star was good. I think it was the faster division of the Risen Star, and then he came back with a solid performance in the Louisiana Derby behind the horses that stayed there 1-2. I guess that would have been Wells Bayou and NY Traffic. So Modernist is a horse who could be getting good at the right time, but I'm kind of with you. I don't know if this Belmont Stakes 9 furlongs, 1 turn against this kind of horse is going to set up well for him. Horse who might set up for him better, and that's only if he's getting better, is Max Player. Max Player hasn't been seen since the Withers, which is kind of odd, but I really do like, if you've been following Max Player's workouts, it's on an honor code. His workouts, he's had some interesting workouts in New York, training track, going 6 furlongs. they really look good. And just looking at his past performances, he could be a horse that could take another big jump up. And he's a horse who finished pretty darn well in that Withers, Matt.
Yeah, and we're talking about some serious odds on a horse who, like you said, Brian, won his last stakes race. The son of Honor Code seems like he'll be suited for the one-turn mile. Of course, Honor Code had one of his biggest career victories, one of your favorite victories, Brian, going the one-turn mile in the Met Mile at Belmont Park. He's been training there for Linda Rice, but he'll have to make a serious step up against this quality field.
Yeah, only 3 races lifetime, and it's been a while since he's raced. And I will say, as much as the potential's there, that Withers probably was. We were talking about Charlatans moving up in class off his Arkansas Derby. Maxfield has to move way up in class off the Withers. Next horse on the list, I want to put in here. He's been bandied about. He might be the least likely of 3 Pletcher horses talked about the Belmont to actually run. But if he does run, I think he's the most talented of the 3 Pletchers. I'm talking about a son of Quality Roan named Dr. Post, who won his last start, Matt, in the Unbridled at Gulfstream Park.
Yeah, we folks, you remember we talked about Dr. Post on our Kentucky Derby Top 10 as a horse who was potential. We thought was really interesting, but like we've said with some of the other horses, he has only 3 career starts, so he's going to have to make a big step up. But I think, out of the Pletchers that are in there, he's got a more favorable running style.
Yeah, and I think he's got more talent probably, unless some of the other Pletchers really step up. I think Dr. Post is a horse with a future, as I talked about in the Kentucky Derby Top 10. Unfortunately, unlike Max Player, who's also had 3 races, Max Player was doing that a little bit earlier on. Dr. Post is more of a late developing son of Quality Road. And for him to jump from that first win and then the Unbridled recently all the way to this class might be a little bit more than they want to bite off right now. Dr. Post, though, I'll say it again, was very impressive winning the Unbridled because Attachment Rate, a nice horse who ran decently in the Mount Win on Saturday, really tried to push and lug in on him for much of the race, giving him not much room to run with and trouble to get through. And when he did, he looked good. So Dr. Post, whether he makes the Belmont or not, a horse to look out for. Another horse who's probably a maybe right now is Basin, son of Liam's Map. He's a Grade 1 winner. Not a ton of these horses are Grade 1 winners yet. We can say that. But Basin, the son of Liam's Map, is a Grade 1 winner from last year in New York. But he's had 3 chances down south so far this year, Matt. Maybe his best race was that second in the Arkansas Derby.
Yeah, he was second in the Arkansas Derby. It was in the Charlatan division where he went out and set the pace. He showed speed in there. Again, I still kind of feel like the 1 1/8 distance is pushing the limits for Basin, even in the one-turn format, and he's going to find an awful lot of quality to deal with.
Yeah, he's also possible for the Bluegrass, as are a few others, such as Maxfield, that we've talked about here. We could see some of these horses skip the Belmont and appear in the July. Now it looks like the Bluegrass will be in July at Keeneland. So Basin could go either Belmont or Bluegrass. But I think more than the distance for me, Matt, it's just that I think the horses that we talked about first might be just a little bit too much for Basin. He ran a good race. I believe he was coming from an outside post, and he chased. He showed some early get up and go, and he chased Charlton around the track. No match, and I wouldn't expect him to move that much forward. But back in New York, maybe he deserves a shot. Another horse who was in that Charlton division of the Arkansas Derby, and the horse that we kind of expected to get up for second, and he never could get by Basin, Matt, is Gouverneur Morris, another son of Constitution, and another horse trained by Todd Pletcher.
Yeah, Gouverneur Morris, like you said, deep closer, and I just don't like that that running style in this field with horses who have a lot of speed out front. So options are with a horse like Gouverneur Morris, and for that matter, I guess his stablemate Farmington Road is use them earlier than you expect so they don't get too far behind, or try and make the closing move. But with this group, particularly the top 4 or 5 that we've mentioned, some of them are going to be running at 100% in the final furlongs.
Right. And Gouverneur Morris, I'll say this about Gouverneur Morris. I think he's more of a Belmont horse than to expect him to do much in this Belmont. Yeah, thank you for laughing, Matt. That was a bad joke. What I mean, of course, I think of him more as a grinder, and I think a horse who might do well in a race like 1.5 miles, the usual distance for the Belmont Stakes. After the Triple Crown has filtered out a few of the top names, as the first leg of the Triple Crown and 1 turn 9 furlongs for this year's Belmont Stakes, it's hard for me to get on a horse who just doesn't seem to really have a strong turn of foot in Gouverneur Morris. And Farmington Road, Farmington Road was our long shot for that Arkansas Derby behind Charlton, and or not behind Charlton. He was in the other division, but he could only rally for 4th. A little disappointing. Again, another horse. I think he might have a stronger rally than Gouverneur Morris, but he's probably going to be farther back than Gouverneur Morris. Might be splitting hairs there, but I like other closers better right now than Farmington Road. A couple more horses we should mention, Matt, on this list of 13 because of their potential for speed, which could make this a little bit more interesting for some of the favorites. It looks like the horse I'm more interested in as a better horse is NY Traffic, New York Traffic, the son of Cross Traffic, trained by Safi Joseph Jr., has run nothing but good races of late.
Yeah, that's for sure. And he ran a good one to finish second in the Matt win behind Maxfield. Like you said, he's got the right running style. He's a pace presser. He's gonna, if he comes into the race, he's certainly going to be a factor early on.
Yeah. New York Traffic may not have blazing speed where he jumps right out to the lead. Maybe they decide to do that one day because he certainly does have speed. But he's been right. He's been on or right near the lead in several races in a row, and he keeps running good races. Good races, maybe not good enough for this Belmont Stakes, but I think if he does choose to go in the Belmont over the Bluegrass, I think he adds a dimension to this race as a horse who could not only press the pace, but a horse who could stick around for a while and maybe not back out by the time they hit the middle of the turn. The other horse I'm not so sure about, but certainly would be out there, would be Chivalry. Chivalry is a horse trained by Ralph Nix. Awesome, of course, is his sire. And Chivalry has sprinted most of his career, and I think he would be in the Belmont to set the pace and see how far he can go. And in the Florida Derby, he went pretty far because he held on for second.
Yeah, he's got a series of nice performances, nice second place finishes in a variety of races, like you mentioned, in the Florida Derby. Behind Tis the Law, he was second in the Hutchinson, second in the Swale for this Florida bred. But this seems like a tough ask if trainer Ralph Nix decides to send him up north.
Right, and I'm interested. We probably will have another horse or two, like I mentioned, to jump into this Belmont Stakes. But I'm interested in Chivalry to some extent, New York Traffic to some extent, because I think they could make life more difficult for a horse like Charlton, who really likes to be on the lead. So their inclusion in this race, one way or the other, will change the way this Belmont Stakes will be run in 3.5 weeks. Folks, it's an interesting crop of 3-year-olds this year. Of course, you have the the Santa Anita Derby coming up in about a week and a half, and you got some intriguing horses in there, including Authentic and Honor AP. Looks like they won't wheel back for the Belmont, but as you can see from this prospective field, if we get something close to the 13 Matt and I have listed here now, the Belmont Stakes, 3.5 weeks, first leg of the Triple Crown, as strange as this Triple Crown may be, will be a race to get excited about.
Yeah, that's for sure, Brian. It seems like this year, aside from the racing that's starting to pick up on the track, we've had a heck of a lot of other stories to make this thoroughbred season something to talk about.
Yeah, and part of that's the Triple Crown. Part of that is what has been caused by this global pandemic. Is what's happened to this year's Triple Crown, and I know people are going out of their heads about a potential Triple Crown winner with such a strange-looking series this year. And I know people are going bonkers over the fact that the Belmont Stakes, the Test of Champions, usually a mile and a half, as the last leg of the Triple Crown this year is 9 furlongs as the first leg. But I'm not going bonkers, Matt. I want to see good racing, something that we missed out on for a while this year with everything that's going on out there. And this 9 furlong Belmont Stakes will be good racing. I don't think it's going to be very easy to win a Triple Crown the way the races are spread out myself. So I'm not too worried about the history of the Triple Crown and what it means if this series is so strange. But I'm just excited for these races.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm excited for these 13 possibles that we've talked about for the Belmont Stakes, and I'm excited to have racing coming back in New York.
Was that your parting shot, or do you have more for us?
No, I think that's it for today.
All right, that sounds good, man. I always appreciate it. Hey, folks, we sure do appreciate you watching each and every week on HorseCenter. Matt and I, this is a labor of love for us, so thank you for watching and hopefully enjoying the show. Thank you to our producer, Brett Workman, here with us every week behind the scenes. Thank you to our sponsor, the best contest site out there, that is Derby Wars. And hey, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, I would appreciate, and I think Matt, would you appreciate if they did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why not? Why wouldn't we? All right, guys, that's our show today. Next week we're going to be back previewing the race of the week and some other big races out at Santa Anita, because it's Santa Anita Derby Day a week from Saturday. And I think we also have the Santa Anita Oaks, Matt, and the Gold Cup at Santa Anita to talk about on that same day. So plenty of good racing. Watch it all previewed right here on HorseCenter.